Welcome in, race fans, to this edition of Through the Gears, presented by Front Stretch. I'm your host, Tino Pattigno. I couldn't be more excited to be back this week talking about everything that happened in Las Vegas Motor Speedway last weekend. Kyle Larson's dominating victory. How does that impact us from a betting standpoint heading into this weekend, in which we preview your best bets for the Shriners Children's 500 at Phoenix Raceway for this upcoming race this weekend? And I have some very interesting, very special, bold predictions for you guys as well. You won't want to miss it. So without further ado, let's go through the gears. Let's start things off now with a Vegas recap from the Pennzoil 400 last week, as Kyle Larson dominated in that one, as we all thought he would. He was the favorite heading into that race, and his odds from a betting standpoint didn't really change much throughout the weekend. So that's something that's important to note as well. But when you look at a driver like Kyle Larson, especially with the team he's with in Hendrick Motorsports, we need to remember, especially in NASCAR betting, that Jimmie Johnson won 5 straight championships. And now I bring that up because drivers and teams, when they are on, when they have a hot streak, when they have consistent years of data and consistency and cars and tracks that run very well at the same place, and you look at them and you think they're going to dominate, they can still dominate. And that's what Kyle Larson did in this one. You know, for instance, if you're new to NASCAR betting, or when I try to explain the differences between NASCAR betting compared to an NFL team, this would be a game where, okay, the favorite in whatever team would be playing on an NFL field would be likely to lose because they have won so many times against a certain opponent. I had that slight thought heading into the Vegas with Kyle Larson. Okay, he's been so dominant here. He won the last race. I don't know if he can do it again. And this is an instance where, yes, they are capable of doing it again. Reading off some stats for you guys here. Kyle Larson had 181 laps led. That means he led at least 27 laps in 6 out of the last 7 Las Vegas races. He swept all the stages. Back-to-back Las Vegas wins, as we mentioned, for Kyle Larson and that 5 team. Chevy has 3 straight wins to start the season this year. And that's important to note because they won 4 races in a row last year, which was the first time they did so since 2001. So can they get it done at Phoenix? Stay tuned for that. William Byron looked to be competitive as well. It looked to be Kyle Larson versus William Byron. Now, hey, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this looks like, well, William Byron, Kyle Larson, right now are the 2 best drivers in the sport. I think right now, the way those 2 drivers are competing against each other on a consistent weekly basis right now is very, very comparable to that of Jimmie Johnson and Jeff Gordon. That's just what it is. That's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm seeing. The race as a whole, for me, I thought it was a good race. I mean, for what it was, I thought it was a good race. There's, passes in the field. There was some tire wear and management issues. There was some pit strategy towards the end. There were some pit road struggles. Tyler Reddick, Kyle Busch, drivers that could have made us some money as well in there, getting into the mix of that and ultimately not benefiting from it. William Byron, as we just mentioned, garbage bag ended up hitting his car, and they had to pit because of that. He rebounded for a top 10 finish, but ultimately in this one, it was a Kyle Larson domination race, swept all 3 stages, and it got very close at the end with Tyler Reddick making a push, making something try to happen, try to have Kyle Larson make a mistake. If he would have made a mistake, Tyler Reddick would have definitely capitalized and won that race. If Tyler Reddick's pit crew didn't make a mistake, I think he could have won that race as well. We wouldn't know unless it happened actually in real life, in real time. But that's just something where Tyler Reddick was very frustrated post-race with that one, saying it's the same thing, different year with him and that team, and they need to get it figured out. And I think they will this weekend heading into Phoenix. I have some more thoughts on that. Let's continue to recap Vegas here. The best cars in that race, obviously Kyle Larson, William Byron, like we mentioned, Tyler Reddick, but Kyle Busch was up there a lot, and that was something that I really thought was going to happen, and really thought it was going to happen because of practice being back. Kyle Busch is one of the best drivers when it comes to being able to get the most out of his car after practice, after qualifying. They did not qualify well. They had some speed in practice, but ultimately he drove through the field. He was second at one point, top 3, top 5 consistently. And then he had issues on pit road, and ultimately that cost him a great finish and cost us some money as well. The 11 car of Denny Hamlin was the quickest Toyota I saw, and Ryan Blaney is the best Ford out there in the field right now. It showed in this race. They have a lot of momentum from last year, the way it ended, obviously championship and everything like that. But I think Blaney's the top dog in the Ford camp overall, and not just at Team Penske, but when you look at the other Ford drivers out there, who is there that can compare? Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, they're not at the same level as Team Penske. We've seen Austin Cindric have more speed than Brad sometimes this season so far. Obviously, it's early, but it's Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, and then we'll talk about it from there onwards. The Fords, to me, very concerning. We'll get to that in a couple seconds here. Okay, so now some notes from last race as well. What made us money, what didn't make us money, what happened in terms of the betting standpoint. We talked about William Byron and the garbage bag. He rebounded for a top 10 finish. Reddick was closer at the end. Now listen to this, a FanDuel parlay, one of the ones that they make themselves and promote for people out there that they can use the FanDuel boosted odds into a parlay to try to make some more people be intrigued by this bet. Had a bet that was Tyler Reddick to finish inside the top 3, Kyle Larson to win the race, and William Byron to finish inside the top 10. Well, that hit. I mean, that was something pretty special to see there on my feeds, and I saw it on the sportsbook or on my feed. It popped up, somewhere for me across the social media world there. And I was looking at it and I was wondering if I should bet it. And I was like, well, I don't know. The new bodies of the Toyotas. I wasn't really sure Tyler Reddick would be the one that would have the speed. And ultimately, hey, 27-1. Congrats to everyone out there who saw that bet, placed that bet. We'll keep an eye out for the next one and be sure to let you guys know if we see something special like that we can capitalize on moving forward. Couple of other bets I'd like to talk about in this one. Noah Gragson top 10. Look at Stuart Haas and especially Noah Gragson getting his first top 10 of his Cup career. Great to see that. That was at plus 280. He finished 6th too, so almost a top 5. Daniel Suarez, we talked about him riding the momentum from Atlanta. Can he get a top 10? That was at plus 130. He finished in 11th. William Byron was the one who secured the top 10, finishing 10th. And C. Bell, that was a rough one for us. We had a lot of money on Christopher Bell. We talked about him very highly, and for good reason. He led laps at Las Vegas, 2 back-to-back top 5 finishes at this track. Ultimately, spun out twice, had a tire issue in the beginning, and then at the end, or in the middle of the race there, spun out again, and ultimately wasn't able to recover. And that was really unfortunate. Christopher Bell, I thought, was going to be a key player in this one, but it was Tyler Reddick. Now, the new Toyota bodies. Let's shift some gears now as we go through the gears and we go from the Vegas recap to the Phoenix prep. And I think this is a great middle point for us because the new bodies, to me, showed out strong for the Toyotas specifically. We saw 5 Toyota drivers inside the top 10 at the end of stage 1, so taking up half of the top 10 there for the Toyota drivers. To me, that is crucial to see in terms of improvements to the Toyota bodies, to see, okay, obviously we expect a Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., and I'd even say a Tyler Reddick as well. I think those 3 drivers are the top of the class when you look at Toyota. But Ty Gibbs, Bubba Wallace, Eric Jones, John Hunter Nemechek, these are now drivers that need help. They need whatever it takes to help them improve, whatever can benefit their speed with those cars. That's what's going to be able to help them. Christopher Bell, as we mentioned as well, but we didn't really get to see. We didn't have enough sample size with him in this race. He was able to move. He spun out early, and he was able to move all the way back up inside the top 10 before spinning out again and having more issues. But with those drivers I mentioned, I saw consistent speed from the Toyotas, and I think the new bodies at the mile-and-a-half intermediate track like Las Vegas proved to be the reason for that speed. And I was intrigued by that. I think that was encouraging runs by Eric Jones and John Hunter Nemechek, who were both running inside the top 10 at different times. Maybe some strategy went into play there for John Hunter Nemechek, but ultimately finished 22nd, Eric Jones in 14th. I think this was an encouraging run, and I think this is a great start to the year. As we saw, last year, they struggled at mile-and-a-half intermediate track. So some good speed at a Legacy Motor Club and the Toyota camp as a whole early on in the season at these mile-and-a-half intermediate tracks. At least this one to start at Las Vegas. I think, to me, they can carry this speed over to Phoenix and other tracks that they struggled with last year, as Chevy and Ford were primarily the faster cars at these type of racetracks last season. Now, speaking of the Fords, very concerned by their speed in watching this race. Only one driver inside the top 10 in stage one. And Ryan Blaney is the best Ford. I think right now, I think everyone could probably admit that. Maybe an argument with him and Logano, but right now, Ryan Blaney's, he's a champion. He's a champion, and right now he's the most consistent Ford driver, leading laps, or at least being in contention for a top 5, top 10 finish we've seen at least every week this season and towards the end of last season as well. Now, my point is, where was everyone else? Where were the other Fords? Brad Keselowski turned it on late at the end, but Chris Buescher had an issue, actually a big issue there, as he had a lug nut fall off, wheel come off. So they'll have some team changes there in terms of figuring out the suspensions and everything like that. I do not believe they'll be doing that for Phoenix, so they have a couple weeks after to decide about that. But the Stewart-Haas racing speed looked encouraging as well, like we mentioned with Legacy Motor Club. But obviously, Gragson, that was a great run. Briscoe was in the mix as well. But Ford as a whole, Toyota, at least in this race, proved to be better than the Fords. I don't know how sustainable this is throughout the entire season with these new bodies. They're still figuring things out. But right now, if I'm the Ford camp, I'm concerned by that last race, primarily because this is a track where Joey Logano normally dominates. We saw Brad Keselowski lead legitimate laps there in the last race that we had this last season there, and everything in terms of pointing forward in the right direction. Well, this was not a good start for them. So Toyota proved to be better than Ford. Chevy's still at the top when you look at the manufacturer leaderboard heading into this season. Now, as we take a look at the Phoenix Raceway itself, the track and what it may bring to the drivers, and for us as a betting standpoint heading into this race, we need to be able to see what type of track it is and what other tracks it's comparable to. That way we can find out which drivers will have the best finishes, speed, and everything in between as we go through the gears in this one. So for the track itself, it's a flat track and it's a 1 mile track, intermediate track, comparable tracks to that of Phoenix Raceway's New Hampshire and Richmond. Those are two compare the most. So I pulled up a little stat sheet for you guys here. Let me read it off to you. For the best average finishes since 2021 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, we have Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Larson leading the way there. And at Richmond, we have Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Christopher Bell, and Joey Logano. Two things that stand out to me here: Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. Now, when we look at Phoenix, it's different, obviously, from those two tracks, but in terms of average finishes and speed, Fords and Chevys are at the top of the list. Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, then we have William Byron and Kyle Larson. Now, when it comes to these intermediate tracks, we are going to expect Kyle Larson and William Byron every race this season to be up there contending for the win. And if you're not, you should be, because that's what happened last year. And I see no signs of them stopping. If William Byron won Las Vegas last year and then won again at Phoenix the next week, I think Kyle Larson can do the same this year. My bold prediction, yes, my bold prediction for this weekend's race at Phoenix Raceway is for the Toyotas to lead a combined 15 plus laps. Well, the reason is they only have 15 laps led in the next-gen car at this racetrack. So to me, who can get that done? Well, that's Tyler Reddick in this one. I think Tyler Reddick is looking for revenge at Phoenix Raceway. After what happened to him last week, I think he has a good shot to go out there and ultimately lead laps and be there when it matters most at the end. Now that we've recapped and we're prepped and we're ready to go make some bets for this weekend's race at Phoenix Raceway for the Shriners Children 500, it's 312 laps, 312 miles at Phoenix Raceway. Let's take a look at who the favorites are at the top of the leaderboard for this weekend at DraftKings. It is the official sports book of NASCAR, so that's what I'm basing my data and my research off of. There could also be some higher odds or some better value out there on different books, so be sure to take a look out for different books and different places out there that you may be able to find some higher value or some better numbers that I may be mentioning. But I'm basing all my research and all my stats for you guys here off of DraftKings and all the odds as well. So let's get right into it. First up is going to be Kyle Larson, as usual. He's a favorite for a reason, though, right? So plus 550 for Kyle Larson to win outright. He led 201 laps in the spring race last year. So this race last year, Kyle Larson led 201 laps, but at the most recent Phoenix Raceway race, which was the championship in November, he led 0 laps in that one. So just something to keep in mind. To me, it does matter because the track is different. The cars and the setups are all different come November to the spring. So I take a look at both evenly and see where each driver sticks up or stands out in that fashion that way. Now, he does have 2 top 5s in the last 3 races and 3 top 10s, and he won this race in 2021, or won at this track rather. He won his championship in 2021. Now, Ryan Blaney, plus 650. He led 322 laps in the last 6 races at this track. 3 straight top 2 finishes for Ryan Blaney at Phoenix Raceway. If I don't see Ryan Blaney get a win this weekend, I might go even more crazier than I already am. And that matters because he has the best average finish out of all active drivers at this track. Now, he's 6-1 right now, or plus 650 on DraftKings. Now, this is something to keep in mind because in his last 2 races, he qualified 15th and 8th. So to me, you can take a look at this and say, okay, maybe he qualifies towards the back and we might have a shot for better value. But to me, this is a number right now at around 6-1, 7-1 that I would probably place this outright winner bet for Ryan Blaney as soon as you're listening to this or watching this podcast here, because to me, he's a driver where if he does go out and win the pole or at least qualify in the top 5, that value is getting cut in half because of his stats at this track, because of the top 4 driver that he is right now. So that's something to be aware of, right? So with certain drivers and certain values, they can go down, they can go up after practice and qualifying. For me, it's not worth the risk to wait for Ryan Blaney. I would hop on him now and be aware, okay, if you want to save a couple units to see if he does go up, if his price increases, then you have the opportunity to do so. But Ryan Blaney, to me, is one of my favorite plays for this weekend, and that's why he is the favorite. Next up is a guy we can never forget about. That's William Byron. At 701, Byron has led 171 laps in the last 4 races here. Him and Kyle Larson, it was a battle between those 2 drivers last year in the spring race. Kevin Harvick was there at the end as well, but Kevin Harvick has now retired. So to me, when I look back at drivers that are going to be a factor in this one, it's not only those 2 drivers each and every week in William Byron and Kyle Larson, but to me, what stands out the most is William Byron was probably the biggest threat, aside from Tyler Reddick there at the end, to beat Kyle Larson at Las Vegas Motor Speedway last weekend. We saw the same thing happen last year, which it was Kyle Larson against William Byron. William Byron won at Vegas and then won at Phoenix. So just something to keep in mind there. Could it be Kyle Larson's time to flip the script and do it himself? Or will William Byron have a rebound week after already winning the Daytona 500? Can he now win at Phoenix like he did last year? I think he's got a great shot to do so. So I would bet this value now if you are a William Byron supporter, or at least for this weekend, you would be with a winning bet if he does, with outright value of 7-1. To me, I think this value is only going to go down post-practice, post-qualifying. The reason is his name, and he's in the top-tier equipment of Hendrick Motorsports, so I think he can qualify well, and if he does so, like we mentioned, the value will go down. Ross Chastain is the next favorite at 9-1. He won in November for the championship race, led 157 laps in that one. Pretty impressive drive by Ross, and he finished inside the top 3 in 3 out of the last 4 races at this track. To me, Ross Chastain is a Chevy driver not named Larson or Byron that I will be betting on for this weekend's race specifically. This is one of his best tracks, and I think he is going to be not talked about that much. Maybe he will be because of the win in November, but just in terms of the Larson and Byron dominance and all of that we have going on, the Blaneys, maybe the Toyotas with those new bodies. To me, if Ross is flying under the radar at least at 9-1, that's great value for a driver who, like we mentioned, has been consistently. I watched the last 4 Phoenix races back in preparation for this weekend's race at Phoenix, and I saw Ross Chastain inside the top 5 throughout all of those races. To me, this value is too good to pass up on. We'll talk about him in terms of finishing inside the top 5, the top 10, top 3 later on when we get to the prop bets down there. But stay with me here, Ross Chastain to win this one. It's great value on the board there, especially with the favorites like we're seeing in Kyle Larson with low value, 5-1, and Ryan Blaney there at 7-1 as well. I think Ross Chastain is a driver that has been there at the front, so you might as well, with that number at 9-1, capitalize this weekend before practice and qualifying. Now, next up is going to be the first Toyota driver in Denny Hamlin. And look, I talked about the Toyotas and their new bodies and how they impressed me with their encouraging speed and effort at Las Vegas. But the stats are not in their favor here when it comes to Phoenix. I already mentioned they only have 15 laps led at this track in the next-gen car. And Denny Hamlin at 9-1. I literally wrote on this piece of paper here, Toyotas, because I just can't place a bet here. Not for them to win outright, at least not for Denny Hamlin. Now, Denny Hamlin, he has won at this track before. He has an average finish of 13th in the last 4 races here. But I just need to see the results first, at least at this track specifically. Hey, if Denny Hamlin goes out, leads laps in this race, fine. And I want to be proven wrong, essentially, because of how strong the Chevys and the Fords have been, or at least especially the drivers that we just mentioned ahead of Hamlin. So to me, if Denny was priced at 12-1, 13-1, that's kind of what I feel like he should be. Now, it's Denny Hamlin, so obviously he's always going to be in the favorite margin or grouping when it comes to any race probably so far this year. I doubt we see Denny Hamlin higher than 10-1 if it's not a super speedway race or if something happens to his car, etc. But to me, I just, for that value, for that low number, for being a Toyota at this track, I need to see that their speed, maybe I won't even say practice and qualifying, because they just don't even, if Denny Hamlin qualifies on the pole, I still think I would have doubts because it's about that long run speed at this track specifically. So that pit box number 1, that could be a play. But aside from that, I'm just out on Denny Hamlin and most of the Toyotas so far this weekend. Let's see who I'm picking to win this one outright. I think one name will surprise you guys. All right, guys, now it's time to decide who we think we like for some outright winners in this one. I have 4 drivers from the favorites grouping that we may have mentioned that I like to win this one outright, not just because they're favorites, but because they have the stats and the speed to back it up. And then I have 4 other drivers that I like for good value. CLV, we'll talk about that. And some drivers that may surprise you in terms of their value in general and their chances to win at Phoenix this weekend. We'll start off with our favorites. It's Kyle Larson at plus 550. To me, this is just a smart play. I just mentioned earlier on in the show that you can't overlook a driver just because he's a favorite, and you can't overlook a driver just because he's Kyle Larson, right? To me, that's the biggest thing I want to learn this season is the fact that, last year that bit me a couple of times. With William Byron, he had 6 wins throughout the entire year, and then there was just times where it was like, oh, well, he won't have that same type of dominating performance, and he did. So to me, I want to get ahead of that this year. I think Kyle Larson could go back-to-back the same way William Byron did last season, and that brings me to William Byron as well. So Kyle Larson plus 550 to win this one outright. I'm betting this before practice and qualifying. Maybe not all my units, but at least a safe play to have it locked in before it does go down. We saw last week at Kyle Larson, he was plus 450 heading into Las Vegas. It didn't go down much. I saw it 4-1, 3-1 post-practice and qualifying. But that's the lowest you're going to see an outright winner for the NASCAR Cup Series anyway. William Byron at 7-1. Another one that I may wait till after qualifying. But to me, I think if you did that, you might be kicking yourself a little bit because you don't want to miss out on some of that value that for a driver in William Byron, that's also in Hendrick Motorsports Equipment, that was also won this race last year, that was also started on the pole last season at this race in November. To me, I think all of those things and points that are leading up to this race this year, just something that I wouldn't want to miss out on. Now, 2 drivers that I like more than those 2 guys actually are going to be Ryan Blaney at plus 650. 3 straight second place finishes. I feel like he's got to break through. He had a great race at Vegas, had a great race at Atlanta, and he's a defending champ. I think if there's a track that Blaney gets it done, it's Phoenix this week. And Ross Chastain at 9-1. He is a consistent top 5 speed driver at this track. The only race Ross Chastain didn't finish inside the top 10 of is when Denny Hamlin took him out last year because they wanted to settle a score. To me, that's something I'm keeping an eye on this weekend. And Ross Chastain as well. This could be revenge Ross. Revenge Ross could be a strong play in this one because he was speeding on pit road last week at Las Vegas, and I think he'd want to make things right for his team. He's a big proponent of, being better each week, and I think he said that in his press conference after the race, and I think because of that, I will see an angry Ross, a Ross looking for revenge, and a Ross that I want to bet on heading into this one. Now, for some long shots, some underdogs, some drivers with more value, the best CLV for this weekend. And if you're new to NASCAR betting or just betting in general, what that means is the closing line value. So what the values open up as, for instance, Alex Bowman, 45-1, a driver that could be strong at this racetrack, who's led laps at this track, who's racing in top tier equipment. Maybe he goes out and qualifies top 10, top 5. Well, that 45-1 number will be cut most certainly in half, maybe even down to 15-1 based off of whatever he does post-practice and qualifying. So that is what CLV is. Now, these drivers, Alex Bowman, there you go, that's one of them. But let's see who else has the best value on the board here. To me, Joey Logano at 12-1 is a play I might have to look at just because he's won at this racetrack before. We know the speed that the Fords and the Penske camp specifically has. I think Ryan Blaney can definitely help in terms of making those other two cars better for this weekend's race. To me, I'm not betting on that until after practice and qualifying, if I do, but just something to keep an eye out on. Tyler Reddick, if there's a driver that is going to lead 15 plus laps for the Toyotas, it's going to be Tyler Reddick. I watched this race, last year's race back, and he was a true contender inside the top 5. Maybe he wasn't going to go out and beat Kyle Larson, William Byron, Kevin Harvick, who were the drivers to beat in that race last season, but he was there at the end. Ryan Blaney as well. He was mixing it up with those guys, and I really like the speed that I saw out of the 45 team in this race last season. Now, I think based off of what happened last week at Vegas, he can continue that strong run, continue that momentum, and if those bodies were a benefit, like I think they were, that will even prove to be more of an improvement for Tyler Reddick and more of an advantage for those Toyota drivers, especially him heading into this one to Phoenix. So 14-1 number, I'm betting that right now for Tyler Reddick. I think he can go out, qualify well, and then that number gets cut in half. I do not want that to happen at 14-1. I want to be holding on to that value when Tyler Reddick crosses the finish line there. Another driver we're going to mention is Brad Keselowski. 28-1 for Brad. I think that's great value, and I think that's something that we might not be able to pass up on. To me, Brad is a strong driver at this track. Now, do I think he's going to win here? That's the tough part, because that's what we're betting on right now is outright winners. This is a play to me. If you want to throw a couple units on it, nothing crazy, I would support that. I think that's what I'm going to do in this one just because of 28-1 number is very high, and Brad Keselowski is a driver capable of getting it done at this track. Now, let's move on to some prop bets as we sort of round out our betting card for this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. Now, as we take a look at some of our prop bets heading into this one, that includes some top 3s, top 5s, top 10s. Now, there's also head-to-heads, match bets, group winners, manufacturer bets, and all those other type of prop bets that you can find. To me, I'm going to keep it a little bit more simple heading into this weekend's race at Phoenix. I don't see too many match bets that I like or head-to-heads, but obviously in the future, things could change. Maybe I'll update you guys, so be sure to follow me at Tino Pattigno and at Front Stretch to see if I have any updates in terms of those prop bets there. But first off, let's start things off with one of my favorite ones in this one. It's going to be Ryan Blaney, of course, at plus 185 for a top 3 finish. Kyle Larson was at plus 125, 130, 150 even for a top 3 finish last week at Las Vegas. I didn't touch it because of the doubt I had in terms of can he continue the dominance. That, to me, the domination that he did continue with reassures me that I think Ryan Blaney can do the same here at Phoenix. So plus 185 for top 3 Ryan Blaney, I like that. That's the only top 3 bet I'm going to touch for this one because of his stats and performance here in the past. Like we mentioned, three straight top 2 finishes, and 5 straight top 5s in general. So next, speaking of top 5s, Ross Chastain and Tyler Reddick are the only 2 drivers I see presenting us with good value here for top 5s. That's going to be a plus 120 for Ross Chastain. I mentioned how high I am on him, and for good reason. Is Tyler Reddick as well, a plus 175. I think you can make some money and make some good value from those 2 drivers. I think these guys are all going to fish inside the top 3. I am that high on all 3 of those guys. So yeah, Ryan Blaney for top 3, Ross Chastain, Tyler Reddick for top 5. Now let's move on to top 10s. In watching back the film of this race, 2 drivers stood out to me that are capable of running and finishing inside the top 10. First up is Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher showed to me in the last 3, even 4 races at this track that he was a contender to be running inside the top 10 throughout the entire race. Now, they weren't showing highlights of his the last one in November, they were showing highlights of him leading that race. But what I was trying to say is the stage would end, right? And they would show William Byron, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson winning the stage. But as I would take a look through our contenders and through our drivers that would be inside the top 10, Chris Buescher was always there. And for minus 105, yes, it is a minus number. We normally like things with a little more value, but to me, I'm looking for Chris Buescher to have a strong run in this one. Now, Brad Keselowski's RFK teammate, plus 100 for a top 10 as well. Those are 2 bets that I'm willing to place right now, especially before practice and qualifying. I think for these prop bets, especially top 10s, that's when you want to get those in, is now before practice and before qualifying, normally on Saturdays and everything like that, because let's say they have a strong run and the strong lap averages or whatever it may be in practice, the odds are going to be cut down, and they'll probably, especially for a top 10, now is the time you want to capitalize on the value. Speaking of value, Eric Jones. I just talked about Chris Buescher. The second driver I saw consistently in the top 10 is that of Eric Jones. I don't know how to describe it because Legacy Motor Club, at least last year, struggled a lot. But Eric Jones just seemed to be there inside the top 10. And I think with the new Toyota body, that's going to prove to be a strong case for Eric Jones to continue the momentum he has so far this season. Maybe not stellar finishes so far, but to me, I think I'm really noticing the speed that they are bringing. It's more than they had last year. So Eric Jones at plus 350 for a top 10. That's a bet I'm willing to place before practice and before qualifying for Eric Jones to finish inside the top 10 at Phoenix. And next is Carson Hocevar. This one's more of a flyer, if you will, at plus 700 for a top 10. And they're reminding me of a team like Trackhouse early on in their career, or Front Row Motorsports that, maybe was underfunded to start, but really making some noise early on in the season. I like Hocevar. He ran well in this race, the championship race last season in November at plus 700. I think it's worth a little flyer action, if you will, just to sort of get a number out there and see if you like it or if you don't. But I think before practice and qualifying, he's just a driver that if he can stay out of trouble, can be there at the end and maybe crack through a top 10, maybe get a little lucky with some strategy or caution. But overall, I think if he's running top 15, we could have a good shot at this, especially how the restarts are here at Phoenix. And my last prop bet for you guys is going to be Ford to win in the manufacturer's tab at plus 225. I think Ford has a good shot to do so with Ryan Blaney, maybe Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher. Bang, those are 4 drivers right off the top of my head. That's what I'm kind of looking for when I look at a manufacturer bet. And if they can help us with some value out there on the board, Chevy to me at plus 100, that doesn't really help us as much as a Ford would. Then we're getting some extra value in terms of Ryan Blaney when we already have 3 Chevys we're looking at, and Larson, Byron, and Chastain as well, in terms of our other outright winners that we would be betting on to win this one. So to me, just a little extra juice there if you guys want it for Ford at plus 225 to win. Now let's take a look at all of our favorite plays that we talked about here at Through the Gears. My 4 favorite plays for you guys in terms of winning bets have been making money for this one, and these drivers that I think will do so for us is going to be Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain, and Tyler Reddick to win outright. Obviously, only one can do that, but I think these 3 drivers really stand out to me the most. If you're unsure if they're going to win, place a top 3 bet, place the top 5 bet. You won't see that much value with the top 10, but in terms of these 3 drivers, I think these are the guys that are going to go out and have a strong run in this one. Eric Jones at plus 350 for a top 10. That is my favorite prop bet for this week. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win the race in this one at Phoenix? And we're about to close it out here at Through the Gears. Guys, so I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Through the Gears. Did you watch or did you listen? Let me know in the comments below who you think is going to win the race this weekend. Let me know if you like any best bets that I didn't mention or some of the ones that I did. And be sure to follow at Front Stretch all across social media, on the YouTube channel as well. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates, and subscribe to the Front Stretch Podcast Network. We have tons of great shows coming out for you guys, whether they're out so far this week, tune in, or if they're coming out later on, as you do not want to miss the Stock Car Scoop. They will give you the post-race breakdown after Phoenix Raceway and everything in between that you need to know for this NASCAR Cup Series season. I'm Tino Pattigno. I'll see you guys next time as we go through the gears.